Hi, everyone. Welcome to Interchange. I'm Dan Jones. Thank you so very much for joining us. Lots of political stuff to talk about this week. A few weeks ago, it was assumed by many that Wisconsin would vote for Obama. But the polls keep tightening. Now some think the state is up for grabs and may, in fact, vote Republican for the first time since Ronald Reagan. We'll talk about the ACT college entrance exam scores for Wisconsin and whether Milwaukee could be blamed for dragging state averages down. And we'll talk about sports for a few minutes because the Brewers season hasn't turned out the way we had hoped. So now we have to get excited about the Packers. All right, let me introduce everybody. We have former business reporter for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Avi Lank, now retired. Kevin Fischer, former broadcast journalist, political analyst, oftentimes a fill-in host over on WISN Talk Radio. And you know Denise Callaway, community affairs and public relations professional. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, the first thing we'll talk about is politics right off the bat. Mitt Romney getting a nice bump in the polls here in Wisconsin, thanks in part to his selection of Paul Ryan as a running mate. And there's some talk that Wisconsin could be a swing state that might determine who, in fact, gets the White House. And new polls show Tommy Thompson with a big lead over Democrat Tammy Baldwin. Is Wisconsin possibly turning into a solidly Republican state?
No, it might be. It's the swing state that it's always been. You know, the Ryan and Thompson both were the beneficiaries of an awful lot of media, of free press. Thompson in the primary, Ryan because he was picked to be on the national ticket. Both of them ought to be coming out of that with a little bit more momentum than perhaps Baldwin and President Obama right now. But you know, it seems to me neither Baldwin nor Obama has really started to really go all out in the state yet. That could be because certainly prior to Ryan being selected, I suspect neither the Republicans nor the Democrats really thought Wisconsin was worth fighting for. Now with Ryan, maybe it is, and I suspect we're going to see, especially after Labor Day, the and the conventions are over, the Democrats really starting to put more money into television advertising. We're going to be seeing more people in the state. It's probably reasonable to say we are a swing state. To say we're becoming solidly Republican is pushing it way, way, way too far.
Kevin, do you think post-convention the Romney-Obama race will be even closer, and maybe Romney ahead?
Post-Republican convention, yes, because both conventions, there's always a bump.
Yeah, that's just traditional.
That's a given. But Avi, you're right that the Republicans now are enjoying a bump with the pick of Paul Ryan. He's electrified the base, and it's not just Wisconsin where Romney is ahead now, albeit by 1 percentage point. It's in other swing states like Virginia and Ohio and Florida. If that trend continues, then I suspect that there will be greater attention on Wisconsin because all the electoral maps show that if Barack Obama loses Wisconsin, he loses the presidency. You had the First Lady in town this week. The president has not been to Wisconsin since February 15th. If things start to shift even further towards Romney, I'm pretty sure that given Paul Ryan is going to make several appearances with Mitt Romney in the Badger State, you're going to see the president come here and you're going to see the Democrats put even more money because they absolutely need Wisconsin. If they don't win Wisconsin, they lose.
Denise, but President Obama has a tremendous ability to fire up his base here as well.
He does, and I think that it's not unexpected that there would be this small bump. Quite frankly, you know, given the fact that Paul Ryan is from Wisconsin, I thought the bump would be a bit bigger. So I'm a little surprised that there wasn't that much momentum that really came forward within his own home state. That said, I think you have to wait till after the conventions. You're going to see perhaps even more of a bump after the Republican convention next week, assuming that the Republicans are able to have their convention because of Tropical Storm Isaac. And assuming there isn't a meltdown at the convention because of the comments that and all the attention that Congressman Aiken is getting about his just horrible comments related to women and abortion. That is the worst thing that could have happened to Republicans, and that may be also influencing what we're seeing as well. You know, there's the idea that the Democrats have said about the fact there's a war on women, and Republicans at every turn seem to be able to do something that shows that perhaps that there is in the Republican Party.
Silly. I mean, that's
not silly. You can't have someone make those kind of comments.
They were reprehensible and indefensible,
Well, apparently not.
every
Wait a minute.
Apparently not indefensible
they're
to
an
Paul
abomination.
Ryan, who helped to support
the same kind of thing.
type of legislation.
Absolutely.
Every Republican in the country has condemned Congressman Aiken. Unlike when a Democrat makes a comment
come on,
like that,
Kevin.
they circle the wagons and they defend it and they say how courageous. Every Republican, every Republican.
Well, can I finish what I was trying to say?
But you brought up Aiken, and
that doesn't mean I don't get to finish my conversation.
But it's very unfair.
It's not unfair. It's not unfair. Apparently, it is a war on women. Go ahead, continue the war on women. Don't let me finish.
You cannot lump all Republicans with what this solo ignoramus said. And to suggest politically, I mean, we're all smart people here, to suggest that Republicans don't want women to vote for them is simply outrageous and untrue.
No, but
that's not what I. That is not what I said. That's not what I said. Let's get back to what I was trying to finish before the war on women apparently became a little personal. The idea behind this is you should expect to see a bump after even the Republican convention. You should expect to also see a bump for President Obama after the Democratic convention ends September 6th. Then is when I think you'll see the real campaigning begin. Well, and I certainly would expect.
Technically, that's when it usually does.
And I certainly would expect.
Right now, other than news junkies like ourselves, most people in America are concerned about whether it's a hot dog or a brat on the grill this weekend. Once the conventions are over and Labor Day is done, then you're going to see very, very intense. And with it being so tight, I think it's going to be very, very ugly.
But I think you're right. The Democrats are they're going to hammer this connection between Aiken and Ryan.
Oh, they will.
Absolutely. And it's to Ryan's benefit that he was announced as vice presidential nominee before this all happened. The thing about Aiken is he sort of hit a daily double of idiocy, because you can lie in American public life and get away with it. How many people still want you to believe that Obama is a Muslim? And we know that's not true. And if he just said he thought Obama was a Muslim, he wouldn't have gotten this all coming down on him. But he picked something where the American public isn't with him. Most of the American public, the overwhelming majority of the American public, thinks that if a person has been raped, that they have a right to an abortion.
If you're looking for the lone conservative here to disagree with you, not going to happen.
Well, that's
not going to happen. I agree.
But
the guy made a complete fool of himself.
I mean, almost everybody said he was an idiot, right?
So it's a non-issue, and if the Democrats
it's
not a non-issue at all.
It is a non-issue because
it's not a non-issue because you take a look at the Republican Party. What is the only language the Republican Party has in its platform related to abortion?
They're a pro-life party, and if the Democrats want to turn their national convention into abortion palooza, fine. That's not what the American public is most concerned about. They are concerned about economics, their pocketbooks, unemployment, the debt, the deficit, and everybody knows that this one guy was completely off base. And so if you want to spend all your time and energy and resources attacking this one guy who Republicans have distanced themselves from, that's fine.
But the difference between this is that this one guy, as you refer to him as, Congressman
I called him an ignoramus too.
Right, okay, well, that's your decision to call him that. Congressman Aiken, the reason that this is getting more attention is because of what he said. And also, you have to remember, as we were alluding to earlier, Congressman Aiken and Congressman Ryan have authored legislation on abortion that talks about the only exceptions being incest and the rape of a woman. So, there is a tie, whether or not Republicans like it, between that congressman and the vice presidential
Actually,
candidate.
it wasn't rape. There was a modifier. I think it was forcible rape that was in the bill that they put together. But the point was that their minds were in the same place, and it would behoove Congressman Ryan. I know he distanced himself by calling Aiken and saying getting out. But I'd like to know a little bit more about what Congressman Ryan thinks rape is.
Well, I will admit, Aiken gave Democrats a gift, but it's only because Democrats want to distract. They don't want to talk about the main issues, so they are going to focus all their guns on Aiken, and I understand that.
It's not all the guns. This is a comment that was made by a person who apparently has a sense of knowledge. He's a Republican who's been elected to Congress.
If you're looking for me again to defend him, it's not going to happen.
Well, I'm not asking you to defend him, but I am asking you to realize the context in which this has happened. This is not somebody who's an ignoramus. He's someone who's been in Congress. He was elected to Congress, The Republican
doesn't mean
Party
he isn't an ignoramus.
but the Republican Party nominated him. There were 3 candidates, and this is the guy they picked to be their candidate.
So even when I agree with you, you disagree with me. That's
right.
just bizarre.
Oh, I disagree with that.
Kevin, it's never that simple.
Next topic. New figures released show that Wisconsin high school students taking the popular ACT college entrance exam averaged a respectable 22 out of a possible 36, which beats the national average and ties for second place for states where more than half the kids take the ACT. But the average score for Milwaukee public school students is pretty dismal, only about 16 out of a possible 36. Is it fair or unfair to say that this shows that MPS is not adequately preparing kids for college, Denise? If you just look at this.
It's unfair because if you look at the numbers, there are other things you need to realize behind this. First of all, Wisconsin's numbers overall in the ACT have remained flat. That's just the way that that's the way that it's been for a number of different years. One of the things that MPS has done over the past 3 years is to say, you know, we think that all of our students need to take this test, need to prepare for the test, need to understand this is something that's critical to college. So the percentage of students taking the test has increased dramatically from about 43% a few years ago to 85% now. So you're actually seeing more students take the test, not just in Milwaukee, but obviously that influences the entire state of Wisconsin. 85% of the kids in MPS take the ACT compared to 71% in total for the state, 61% for just public schools in the state of Wisconsin. So the state has been flat overall. Are MPS scores where MPS wants them to be? Of course not. And that's why some of the rigor that's coming in under literacy, that's already in place under literacy, mathematics, and science, all tied back to the Common Core state standards, which are the standards that the federal government and states have agreed kids need to be able to achieve in order to be successful in college. That's in place. The district has also put in place 2 new college access centers to be able to help prepare students for college, including preparation work for the ACT. So to take a look solely at the numbers and say this must be what's happening doesn't recognize 2 facts. Number 1, state numbers overall have been flat. And number 2, the percentages of kids taking the test across the state, primarily due to what MPS is doing, have increased. And experts will tell you that as you see those numbers increase, you expect to see either flatness or some slight decrease in state test scores. And that's what we saw. We saw state test scores decline by 0.1%. It's a very small number statistically.
Is it right to force so many MPS kids to take the test? I mean, for years and years, we heard we have to get kids college ready, but now you're hearing more people in manufacturing saying, you know, we have to prepare kids for options other than college. Maybe we have to steer them into the workforce, so let's not think about the ACT so much.
Well, but all the kind of work that you do to prepare to take the test, the kinds of things that Denise was listing, are important whether you're going to be teaching a class in microbiology or running a lathe. You know, the kind of thinking that has to go into taking a test like that, the kind of knowledge that you have to have, the ability to write a declarative English sentence, the ability to understand basic mathematics and things, that's important no matter what you're going to do. And to say, well, we're just going to assume that here's a group of folks that we're not going to make that as an expectation for isn't fair to them and isn't fair to society. You know, a 1/10 of 1% percentage point change either way in something that scored, was it 36 is the high score on that? Right. Mm-hmm. I was an SAT kid, so I don't remember this so well. That's not, that could be what economists sometimes call statistical noise. You know, you get a number which has gone up and up, little down or little. We're second in the country in this. MPS is vastly increasing the pool of people who are going to take it. I would think that that's actually something you ought to be not too upset about. Obviously, you want to do better all the time, but I think a lot of what Denise says makes a lot of sense.
But the reality is also 16 out of 36 is a horrible score on the ACT.
Well, Denise said, you know, is MPS where they want to be? No. But in your open several minutes ago, you raised the question, should Milwaukee be blamed for this decline? And I say the answer is no. It's not that the kids are learning less. It's that more kids are taking the test. And the headline can look alarming and disturbing. But when you delve into the reasons why it happened, I mean, you see that MPS commendably back in 2010 went to universal ACT testing. And I think that's admirable. So you've got 60%, if I can oversimplify, 60% of kids in the state of Wisconsin are basically doing okay. They're doing fine. But what about the other 40%? We don't know. So because we're not testing everybody or a larger sample, we really don't know what kind of job we're doing statewide K through 12. We may think we know, but we don't have a firm handle on that. I suggest that maybe DPI, the state legislature, Governor Walker, should this next session maybe consider statewide doing what MPS has done, and that is go to universal ACT testing, because it would give us a better grip on how we're doing, and also I think it would expose more children to who maybe weren't thinking about going on to college. Now they have to study for the test, they have to take the test, and maybe, just maybe, more of them will go into college, which would be to their benefit.
If it becomes an expectation, MPS or Clintonville or Whitefish Bay or wherever you want to say, if it's an expectation that you got to do this, I agree with Kevin. Goodness, this is twice today. Something's very wrong.
You should go buy a lottery ticket.
I agree with you, though, that if it's made an expectation, you're probably going to get in the long run better results.
And where districts, and there are a ton of them, where less than half of the kids are taking the test, it shows what was probably predictable. Your minorities, your poor kids, your kids that are struggling with the basics, math, reading, etc., are not equipped. They're not prepared.
And they're not taking the test. They're not even in the pool.
No, and maybe they should.
Yeah, I think.
And while I'm not a big fan of state mandates to the public school system, maybe this is a good thing that you make certainly more kids that are taking now, because there's too many question marks out there about how we're really, really doing if 40% of our kids are not taking that test.
All right, shifting gear, let's talk sports for just a few minutes. So this year, the Brewers won't be going to the World Series. We can say that definitively. It wasn't the season.
Not statistically impossible yet.
It wasn't the season we had hoped it would be. But that doesn't stop fans from now turning their attention to the Green Bay Packers, who look pretty good Thursday night, and the possibility of another trip to the Super Bowl. Denise, I know you like the Packers.
I do. Last night's game, good game. About time. You know, Aaron Rodgers was really, at his best. He was just phenomenal. Now you're playing the Bengals too, so I mean,
and it's preseason.
And it's preseason. All those things.
It's a bore.
All those things, but not to a Packer fan. How can it be a bore? Look at
because it's preseason. It means zilch.
We fill Lambeau when we have it in our squad scrimmage. People love the Packers. I love the Packers. For me, hope springs eternal.
Do you worry that when the season starts, they play their first game on a Sunday, and then 4 days later they play their second game, both at Lambeau Field? Though.
Yeah. I'm a little worried about that, but I think part of it depends on how we come through this preseason. If we can come through Thursday's game against Kansas City without any major problems, without anybody being injured, then I'm not nearly as concerned. It's early enough in the season. Yes, that's a short turnaround. But right now, these guys are in better condition than they're going to be any other time of the year, so I'm not really worried about that.
Does this team depend on Aaron Rodgers completely?
That's the one thing I suppose you could worry about, even someone like me who pays attention to football, but
you're a hockey guy.
Yeah, talk about hockey or baseball, we can talk a lot more.
Sorry, Avi.
That's okay.
Have we ever talked about hockey here?
No.
We'll get there. But,
guys with weapons in their hands,
bats. But it did look like perhaps their second string quarterback is it. That's a position even I know they have weakened in this year. Now assuming Rodgers stays okay, that doesn't make any difference. But that's sort of like what happened to the Brewers this year. Where their starters were able to do okay, and then the bullpen would come in and the roof would fall in. And what had been
you need to knock on wood now, please, because we need to make sure that I'll knock on wood.
What had been a strength turned into a weakness for the Brewers, and if it hadn't, we would be talking, more about them at this point and less about the Packers. But that seems to me to be the one thing. If I were going to really worry a lot about the Packers, that is what I would worry about.
Well,
and who knows? You know, that there seems to be a lot of movement of players in the next couple of weeks between now and the opening day, which is what, a week from this coming Sunday. And it's possible that there'll be a veteran quarterback out there that the Packers will snap up just because I wouldn't pretend to know enough technically to know whether Harrell is his name.
Now, if Gerard was here,
know enough because you nailed. If Gerard was there,
he would say
they're going to go undefeated,
and he'd say the Packers should have drafted Wilson from the Badgers.
Well, he might be right about that, actually.
Yeah.
But the couple of things, and yes, I'm a Packer backer too, but I'm not waving green and gold pom-poms here either. Yes, they depend a great deal on Aaron Rodgers, and why not when he's, if not the best quarterback in the league.
Absolutely.
He's in the top 2 or 3. If he goes down, you're dead. And you better go out and get a better backup quarterback because that is a possibility in this league with injuries. And I don't like the fact, maybe he looked good in that preseason game, running around haphazardly and scoring touchdowns, but you're taking a big risk and a big gamble that he could get hurt in a meaningless football game. I would sit him down and say, look, no more of that. Get rid of that football. We need you out there because if you get hurt, we're in trouble. The other problem is the defense, which was very soft last year, bent a lot but didn't break. But you're going to have to outscore your opponents a lot again this year. And the defense, I think, will be better, but it's not going to be one of the best defenses in the league. That's why you need Rodgers in there, all his weapons, to literally outscore your opponent.
I think the defense looked a lot better last night than people had thought it was going to.
Well,
Cincinnati and its preseason.
Yeah, I know.
Well, no, Cincinnati was a playoff team last year. You know,
again, this is
What happened with this? I thought Don
game.
Capers was like the best defensive coordinator in football.
Yeah.
Coming in, but you have problems in that defensive secondary, and it's a pass-happy league. It's a pass-oriented sports league, and they've got to find a way. They're strong up front. They're strong with the defensive front and the linebacking crew, but in the secondary, they've been burnt over and over and over again. To me, that's a concern.
So let's talk about the Brewers for a minute. I mean, they were part of this discussion, theoretically.
They're done.
Well, I will admit that
Not statistically, according to
even if
Okay, Mr. Las Vegas.
Yeah, even if statistically it's true, they aren't going to. Not only are they not going to make the World Series, I'll go out on a limb and say they won't make the playoffs.
Gee, Javi, I'm glad you're on the program tonight.
But assuming
They're not a very good team.
Well, no, offensively they're fine, and assuming that we don't find out that 3 other Brewers players will not have the luck that Ryan Braun had when it comes to drug testing, they should be all right offensively next year. It's a question of what they do with their pitching. And if Axford comes back to anywhere near where he was, and if Henderson is anywhere near what he appears to be, the other reliever that they called up from the minors, the journeyman minor leaguer, you know, they ought to be able to make a little bit of noise next year. Wait till next year, but maybe we will.
All right, we move on. Well, this week's big fight over so-called legitimate rape and pregnancy shows what can happen when people let their political beliefs control their brain functions. The fancy name for that is motivated reasoning. But Congressman Todd Aiken's strange biology lesson is only the latest example. Rick Horowitz couldn't be here today, but he left behind some thoughts on another case that's got him, well, kind of hot under the collar. Rick.
Get ready to ridicule, O ye of little fact. I'm recording these comments a few days before you'll be seeing them, which is always risky. In this case, especially risky, because I'm talking about global warming. Those recent findings about how record-settingly hot it was all last month, how record-settingly hot it's been all this year, and for the past number of years. But if the particular late August day you're watching this happens to be a not-so-hot day, even a chilly day, and that's been known to happen this time of year, well, then some of you will have a perfectly snappy comeback. Global warming when it's only 63 degrees out? Good for you. Very snappy. Very clever. Some of you will even convince yourself that that's a winning argument, a brilliant argument, that if it's cooler than normal on one day, on any one day, then that whole climate change, global warming thing is totally bogus. Of course, you're the same people who, whenever the temperature suddenly goes triple digits, you say, it's just one day. You can't prove anything from just one day. No, you can't, which is why there's this thing called science. In science, you collect information, lots of information. You take a whole lot of days and you keep careful records. Records of temperature, of extreme weather events, droughts, hurricanes, tornadoes, those kinds of things. That's called evidence. Then you compare those records, that evidence, with records from lots of other days and lots of other years. You look for patterns, you look for trends, you look for anomalies and for connections. You go where the evidence takes you. And that's called thinking. Thinking isn't deciding ahead of time that you'll ignore this fact or that fact, or the implications of this fact plus that fact, plus all these other facts because they're bad for your bottom line, or because you don't like big government, or because you can't stand the guy who's on the other side of the argument. If he says day, it must be night. If he says black, it must be white. That's not thinking. That's putting your brain on autopilot. And you don't need a weatherman to know which way that wind blows.
Well, thanks, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.